All right, how we doing, kids? So we are finishing up chapter 14 today, dealing with the Native Americans in North America. So again, we're gonna go over them quickly. If you were paying attention to all this chapter, you could realize that the three most important civilizations are the Incas, the Aztecs, and the Mayas. All right. So the Southwest natives, one of our vocab words, right? Mesa Verde, right? There's a picture of Mesa Verde. Right? That's one of your pueblos. That's also Pueblo Bonito, right? It's still the largest remaining pueblo today. There are tribes that live there. It's more modernized. Mesa Verde, as you can see, that's more of a historic site now. So the Hohokam people. The Hohokam people came from the Southwest. They're in the Arizona area. There's traces of them in like New Mexico. They're known for farming corn. They're known for farming beans and squash, right? And they will use canals to water crops. So essentially, they took, the ideas that the Aztecs and the Mayas had with using the chinapas, right? Almost self-irrigating, and that's what the Hohokam people do here in the Southwest of the United States. Then, like I just mentioned before, the Pueblo natives, right? People who are living there. The Pueblo is like a cave almost. They're living in the side of the mountains, like you can see here at Mesa Verde. They lived in cliff dwellings known as a pueblo. And then again, like I told you, Pueblo Bonito is still intact today. I forget the population that lives there. It's a small population of people that live there. It's more of a tourist site. Mesa Verde is also a tourist site as well. And what kind of defeats or ends the Southwest natives is the drought that they have, because again, they're in the desert. So many of our early tribes, they didn't really know how to prepare for an upcoming drought. They were also attacked by neighboring tribes as well, like the Navajo and the Apache, right? Also two groups that are native to the Southwest of the United States. All right, so that's our Southwest natives. Keep going, we'll go to our Eastern tribes now. A little bit more, some of the people you probably are heard of, maybe not on this slide, but on the next one, and the one after, the Adena and the Hopewell groups, they will be living in the Northeast. All right, I don't have a picture of earthworks, but let me pause this and I'll get you a picture of earthworks. So there's a picture of earthworks right there, and I know it's kind of hard to tell, but basically what they're doing is creating mounds, or working the earth to create these mounds and these symbols that they can, they're essentially going to be symbols to the heavens, right? And that's what these earthworks were. The Adena and the Hopewell tribes, the very early groups of people in the Northeast, they are creating these earthworks to really communicate as a ritual and communication with the heavens. Okay. Continuing down, a group that we call now the Mississippians, built bigger, and they lived in the Mississippi area, and they built, large cities, okay? So if you remember, like the Iroquois and the Algonquian, they lived in a little bit smaller tribes, where the Mississippians, that's just, again, a label for the people the Native Americans that lived in this area. They had a few major cities, right? Cahokia being probably the biggest city that we know about of the Mississippians, right? Located in present day Illinois, and it housed up to 20,000 people. So the Mississippians, they figured out a way. They grew a large amount of crops on a large scale rather than individuals, right? Because again, they're living in a city with 20,000 people, which today is very small, but during this time it's incredibly large, especially here in the New World, where no Europeans have been yet. And then the Natchez people, those are probably a little bit more known. You guys have probably heard of them before. Their people record history of the Mississippians and carried out a lot of their traditions. So a lot of the living in these large communities, a lot of growing large fields. They go on large hunts as well. Again, all this is hunting the buffalo, all come from the Mississippians. Okay, Mississippians were not big on recording their history, but luckily the Natchez people were, and the Natchez people are the ones who record their history, and that's how we know about them today. They also carried out some of the Mississippian traditions. Alright, so we're going to keep moving on. The Inuits. The Inuits, I like to call them like the fourth member of like the big three, and then there's the Inuits, right? The Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayas, and then the Inuits. Okay, so the Inuits are also what we know as the Eskimos, right? They're the first, they're essentially the first stop, right? When you're crossing the land bridge from Asia, the Inuits are going to be in northern Canada and Alaska. So that's the first stop where, when people are traveling, that's where they first stop. And again, more people trickle down to, the northeast of the United States, the southeast of the United States, southwest, then down to Central America, down to South America. But the Inuits, they're the first ones, that's the first stop. Okay, so 2000 BC is when they first settled in northern Canada, again with the land bridge. Okay, they adapted to the Arctic culture, right? They're going to be living in small groups, right? They can't have a large city like Cahokia with the Mississippians because they need a large amount of food. They need large fields, right? And they're not going to have large fields, and they're not going to have an abundance of food. So they're going to have to adapt to the cold climates, right? Living in small bands of people, like I said, small groups now, a little bit larger than your family, maybe, or extended family, right? Maybe you're going to have, 15 to 20 people, but that's about it. They're going to hunt and fish together. So if they're adapting to, the Arctic, they're going to be covered in a lot of cloth and clothing. They're also going to hunt and fish for certain mammals and fish in the water, right? Seals and other mammals provided food, clothing, bones for tools and needles and even oil for their cooking, right? If you guys know, like the blubber and stuff like that is really, it's good for cooking, it's good for using for fire, right? So they will use all of that. Again, the Inuits, not much is really known about them because, again, they don't really record a ton of their history. But we do know, again, that they live in essentially igloos, right? Or what we call them as igloos today, right? These small ice huts that they would use to kind of preserve the heat. Like I wrote here too. Again, they're using seals and any mammals that they come into contact with and that they kill for food. But more than food, it's their skin, their clothing, their tools, and things like that. Right. Again, if they're going to be living out in the Arctic climates, right, they're going to need something that's going to protect them from that. And these animals live in the Arctic climate, so obviously their fur, their skin is going to be resistant to the cold. Okay, potlatch. Okay, potlatch is a ceremony that it's kind of a ceremony that like potluck that we do today. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk a little bit more with you guys instead of just skipping over it, right? So it's a ceremony practice in Canada and northwestern coast of the Americas. Potlatch is still done today, right? Native American tribes in Canada and in Northwest America, right? Think about like out in Oregon and Washington area. It's when you have a person of high rank and wealth distributes lavish gifts to a number of his gifts. And by accepting these gifts, the guests acknowledge the host's high status within the society. So basically, I have, let's say I am the high person of rank. I have this party. I am giving you guys all gifts because I am very wealthy, and I am giving you these gifts so you can acknowledge how high I am in status. A little bit, it's like the opposite of a potluck dinner, right? Potlatch is where I'm giving you the gifts. Potluck is like where everyone comes together and brings their own gift. So you can see the kind of relation there. But yeah, potlatch is still celebrated by some of the Native American communities today. And finally, the Iroquois seems to be the one thing that people mostly remember. So they're northeastern group of people living up around here in the New York area. That's why we always talk about them. Iroquois League was very popular. If you remember, they built longhouses, right? The long wooden houses. They didn't have cities as large as like the Mississippians, like Cahokia, But they still did have, large villages, right? They hunted, things that are around here, deer, fox, things like that. And if you remember, the whole point of the Iroquois League was to unite together to defeat anyone that opposed them, especially the Europeans, right? So you will need to know the 5 groups, right? The Mohawk, the Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, and the Seneca. All right, and that's really it, folks. The Iroquois League that's where we're gonna end. It's kind of catching us all up on where the New World is. In the next chapter, like I said, we're going to get into the Age of Exploration. That's with all the Europeans making their way to the United States. All right, test is on Wednesday, folks. Please study. We will have a Google Meet sometime Monday or Tuesday, and we'll review on Tuesday. All right, stay safe.